Welcome everybody to our webinar on the life sciences sector in Ireland. We'll get started in just a moment, and to give a chance for more people to join the webinar today, we'll be back in 60 seconds.
Hi, I'm Dave Waddington and I'm Executive Director at NSF. Oh, what a great question. And I think if you are just before the inspection and you're thinking of an answer to that question, it's way too late. So what you need to do is be inspection ready all the time and make sure your quality systems are operational, in place and in use. So immediately prior to the inspection, the only thing you can really do is the basic logistical planning of making sure you know who's coming, where they need to be, who's going to greet them, and importantly, communication on site and how you're going to manage it.
Welcome back everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Ireland, the global life sciences leader. And this is an NSF webinar, and it's nice to see so many familiar faces on the call today. I'm Brian Cleary. I'm the Global Marketing Director for our Life Sciences Division.
And I'm Marie O'Callaghan, and I'm a Executive Director in the Training Division.
What we're going to do today over the course of about 20 to 25 minutes is to look at the growth of the Irish life sciences sector, but also look at some of the challenges that are affecting it. And a lot of this has come from feedback from people who are on the call today who have been in touch with us. And we'll touch on that as we go along. So firstly, before we start, I'm going to talk about NSF very briefly, because some people will know about NSF and some people might not, and it might be their first interaction with the company. But NSF has been in existence since September 12th, 1944. And I mentioned that date because we celebrated our 80th anniversary 2 weeks ago with a number of events at headquarters in Ann Arbor, in Michigan, in the US, and at our offices all around the world. And when we talk about offices all around the world, NSF has over 45 offices and labs, including, if you look right in the center of that map, in Ireland. And as a company, we cover industries such as food, water, and life sciences. And we've offered testing, inspection, and certification services. But in the last 20 to 25 years, we've worked more so in the consultancy, training, and auditing space, particularly in the life sciences sector. So that's NSF. And like as I said, we're going to look at the development of the Irish sector. And firstly, Marie, let's look at the issue of Ireland as a life science entity and as a life science powerhouse. Tell us some of the main facts about what's going on in the sector right now.
So while we do have all the big companies, we actually have 127 device manufacturing facilities in Ireland and 108 pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities. But that's been significant growth since the 1950s, hasn't it, Brian?
It has, and a lot of this comes from the change in economic policy in Ireland in the 1950s. Since the foundation of the state in the early 1920s, right through to the late 1950s, Ireland essentially practiced an economic policy of isolationism. And with the end of the De Valera reign in Irish politics as our Taoiseach or Prime Minister, we saw Sean Lemass come in, and there was the beginning of introducing foreign direct investment. And you'll see that FDI acronym pop up a couple of times. And since the late 1950s and early 1960s, the Industrial Development Authority, or the IDA, have been out in the market globally, encouraging companies to come into Ireland. And we saw one of the first pharmaceutical companies in Ireland open 60 years ago this year in Dublin. And particularly since the mid to late 1980s, there has been a significant ramp up with the amount of device and pharma companies opening in Ireland. And with regards to that, Marie, whilst we have had success in that regard, there are challenges.
Yeah, well, I suppose the industry is not immune from the challenges that all the other industries are experiencing at the moment. Headcount and skills shortages and social issues such as finding places for people to live when they are moving into the industry. But, you know, we look at those later, but we still have our advantages, you know, proximity to North America. We are that island in the middle of the Atlantic, which is a nice stepping stone between America and Europe. So it is still got a good future.
And that's a good point, Marie. If you look at where we are in terms of the exports from Ireland through all of our sectors, technology, other types of manufacturing, food, of which, of course, Ireland has a fantastic reputation globally. Pharmaceutical products alone account for over 50% of exports. And we have been talking a lot about skill shortages already and talent shortages, and I know we're going to move on to that. But right now, there are 30 live active projects for new facilities or expansion of existing facilities. And just to put that into perspective, if you look at Dexcom in Galway on the west coast of Ireland, 1,000 jobs. Novo Nordisk in Leinster on the east coast of the country, 1,100 jobs. And then in the south of the country, in what the province of Munster or in Cork, we're looking at 400 jobs. So there are a lot of new announcements and a lot of positivity. And one of the things that I know you're going to touch on in just a moment, Marie, is in and around the skills piece. So if you look at the existing projects that exist right now, irrespective of new announcements, it's anticipated that we're going to need to bring in 29,000 new people to meet the demand that is currently there by 2027. That's approximately 21,000 in pharma, 8,000 in medical devices. And to deal with that, because there's going to be challenges, because at the end of the day, what people often forget is the population of Ireland is only 5.5 million, and we're one of the biggest exporters of medicinal products and devices in the world. The government and public sector and EU funding and so on is coming in to support that in terms of addressing some of the issues in terms of resource issues such as housing, but also then in terms of skills and training and so on. And just three projects to highlight before I hand back to Marie. Pfizer and AstraZeneca have made significant announcements in recent times. Eli Lilly, 2 weeks ago, many people on the call will have seen the coverage of this, their third facility in Munster in the south of Ireland, and that's going to be in Limerick, a €1 billion euro project, going to create approximately 1,000 jobs. And that goes to show you the strength of the work that the Industrial Development Authority are doing. However, the big question is, where are these people going to come from? And Marie, that's one of the issues I know you want to touch on in terms of the skills shortage and the training needs that exist in the sector.
Yeah, so it's like Brian has just said, it is a country of 5.5 million, and there are literally thousands of jobs available in just this sector, let alone the other sectors. So it is in competition, but it has been acknowledged, and they are being addressed by publicly funded organisations such as SkillNet and Enterprise Ireland. But an expert group for future skills has shown that there are 21,000 additional jobs to be created by 2027 and 8,000 jobs in the medical device sector. So companies have to upskill or cross-skill employees and recruit to meet demand. So they have to recruit, possibly they're recruiting people from outside of the industry. So getting those up to speed with the industry and all of the challenges in that is creating training opportunities.
And I know that's something that we're working on quite a lot at NSF in terms of you and our other colleagues in the training division. But this is a piece of research that many people on the call today might find interesting. The research department in NSF put this together for us in the last few days. And just to give you an understanding of where these stats come from, they've looked at the direct recruitment sites, so the actual company sites for the main multinational companies that we showed you the numbers for earlier on, the 100 plus medical devices, the 106 or 108 pharmaceutical companies, and then a lot of the indigenous companies that are quite notable, and some of the supporting organizations, government organizations, and so on, that would employ people in this sector. And then they come up with these numbers. So right now, there are over 2,000 quality vacancies in Ireland in pharma, biotech, and medical devices, 900 regulatory vacancies. And a lot of that has been fueled by the move of licenses and so on from the UK as a result of Brexit. And that issue is still a live issue today. 800 lab vacancies and 100 clinical vacancies. So that sounds very positive. But if you look at it, we've talked about 29,000 jobs being needed to meet current needs between now and 2027. That's going to put a capacity constraint on companies if they can't get those people in. on a QP level, there's a shortage of QPs in the country. That could possibly delay batch releases. So what companies are doing, and we're seeing a lot of in NSF, is they're coming to us to outsource functions or outsourcing parts of teams in issues such as regulatory and it's not just the CMC pieces, it's regulatory strategy as well, but then also in auditing. And one of the things we'll talk about in a moment is supply chain. And as people have to adapt their supply chains post-COVID, they're having to look at more auditors, and there's a demand for auditors. And we're effectively becoming the outsourced auditing department of many companies. The other issue here then is what's going to pay for all this training? Where are we going to get these people? And as Marie said, we're often seeing people being cross-trained from the food industry, particularly on the manufacturing side and somewhat in the quality side, where there are some if not a lot of transferable skills. But there are supports there for companies and for individuals as trainees. But on the funding and the support piece, it doesn't just extend to training. One of the reasons Ireland has been able to recruit or identify and bring to this country so many of those world-leading businesses is from an ecosystem of support. So the Industrial Development Authority, the IDA that I talked about, having been founded in the late 1950s, that is one of the biggest supporters in terms of R&D grants to companies across all sectors, tech, life sciences, and so on. Then through different government budgets and announcements, there has been a lot of support. Then there's also the issue of R&D tax credits. And Ireland gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes in terms of its taxation structure. But what we're seeing now is almost a pan-European approach to corporation tax. And the corporation tax levels are changing. So it's not just a taxation issue anymore. However, the government does allow write-offs in terms of R&D across the board to life science and other companies. Then there's the physical embodiment of that support through organizations such as NIBRD. And I'll take my time setting this. It's the National Institute for Bioprocessing Research and Technology. That's based on the UCD campus, the University College Dublin campus in Dublin. And then there's funding, and as Marie said, through organizations such as SkillNet. SkillNet have 70 networks around the country that part fund and support training for companies to keep people upskilled and ready to do the jobs that need to be done. And SkillNet has a number of sector-specific networks, but then also if you look at geography such as Waterford Chamber SkillNet, County Tipperary SkillNet, Cork Chamber SkillNet, they're reflecting the need in their geographical area from life science companies and providing a lot of training to companies in those sectors. So Marie, one of the things I touched on a moment ago was supply chain. Talk to us about how there are challenges in that sector right now.
Yes, it is. Supply chain is a big issue, and keeping a supply chain integral and safe is something that a lot of companies have had to look at. And 78% of companies have said that they have changed their supply chain strategies since 2020. The strategy has changed from having one sole supplier to having multiple suppliers. And one of the things that companies are aware of is that the quality of their suppliers feeds into the quality of their product. So auditing and ensuring the bona fides of your suppliers is critical. But the audit teams in pharmaceutical companies and med device companies were always resource stretched, and even more so now with more audits to be done. And this is an area where NSF are very active in being the third party on behalf of companies doing audits all across the world for an increasing number of CDMOs and other types of suppliers across the globe.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that, Marie, because one of the things we did when we promoted this webinar first was we went out and asked people for their opinion. We solicited responses to our life sciences at nsf.org email. And I have to say thank you very much to many of the people who were on this call and others who couldn't join us today for their feedback. And supply chain was a big issue. The issue was, as you said, widening the supplier base, but then having enough auditors to get around to accurately audit these new suppliers. Some of the other issues that came in via email, LinkedIn messages, and through other channels were around regulatory market access and compliance issues. And just firstly, one of the main things here, and this isn't a specifically Irish issue, particularly on medical devices, was the introduction. We learned about it in 2017. It was delayed when it was introduced because of the pandemic. But MDR, the medical device regulation, is here. And a lot of people I know that we're in touch with, both yourself and myself, Marie, talked about the inconsistency of the application of it. A lot of that is down to interpretation, and a lot of that is down to how it's actually applied by the notified bodies. And the notified body issue was another piece that came up there. Also, it wouldn't be a modern day webinar if we didn't talk about artificial intelligence and the use of artificial intelligence or generative AI generated content within a submission for a regulatory piece also came up as something where people are a little bit operating in the dark at the moment. Companies, of course, from a financial and cost perspective are considering this, whereas there is a little bit of uncertainty in the market, particularly in Europe, about where we stand with that at the moment. And that's really a case of definitive answers on this from the specific regulatory authorities, and then also bridging the skills gap so people know what to do. The other piece, and it's quite timely for those of us who are in Ireland, is we're heading up to Budget Day. And Budget Day, for those who don't know, in Ireland is quite bizarre for someone outside of the country to see. We actually have a whole centerpiece in the media for 10, 12 hours around the delivery of the government's annual budget. And it's been like this for decades. Our next budget is due in a matter of days. And one of the issues flagged up, I know I received it from a few people, was for pharmaceutical companies manufacturing innovative products, there is that difficulty in getting governments and departments of health, and Ireland is one case in point, to come on board and pay the price for that treatment. And because of cost difficulties, budget constraints, sometimes that treatment can't get onto the market to treat patients. And there's a frustration from the industry that, firstly, they've developed the product and they can't sell it. And secondly, there's a fear that this might lead to a situation where if there's a consistent reluctance to put a product on the market, it might stifle innovation. And that's one of the big issues there. And just one other point, really, in terms of the regulatory and the market access piece. A lot of this, again, is fueled by a lack of understanding, or I shouldn't say lack of understanding, but a lack of clarification or clarity, particularly when you look at MDR. And then there really is a case of market access and innovative drugs being able to get onto the market, most importantly, to treat the patient. So Marie, just before we finish up, what are we seeing, or what are you seeing in your career here at NSF in terms of the Irish market and how we're helping people?
Well, one of the big demand areas is auditing. As we mentioned before, with the diversification of supply chains, there is just so much auditing to be done that companies, no one company is going to be able to facilitate all that they need to do. And from a training perspective, a lot of companies are running graduate programs, or they have apprentices, and we have a lot of offerings that are helping apprentices and graduates. Even simple things like short modules on e-learning, which will enhance any in-house training, or we can provide programs of in-house training to fast track the transition from other industries into the pharma and med device industry. So we can help in simplifying and optimizing quality management systems so that the short resources that companies have can be maximized by having an external look at their current systems and making sure that they're as smooth as they can be to make the most of what they have in the interim of having enough staff.
Thanks very much for that, Marie. It's actually interesting. One final point on terms of e-learning. I was talking to one of our colleagues just this morning, and one of the trends that I didn't realize was happening is a lot of companies are purchasing our e-learning and putting it onto their own learning management systems or intranets. So that's an interesting point. Just before we finish up, I'm going to give you some ways that you can get in touch with us and meet up with us if you so wish. So we are available on nsf.org. You'll see that on the right-hand side of your screen. And of course, there's lots at the moment about our 80th anniversary. Our knowledge library is fascinating treasure trove of information. There are hundreds and hundreds of articles relating to the device sector and best practice, thought leadership, and so on there, and also the pharma sector, as well as clinical piece. And you can follow us on LinkedIn. You'll find us at NSF Life Sciences on LinkedIn, and there's consistent updates in terms of what's going on. And I would encourage you to check out one, if not all three of those. If you want to meet us, we'll be in and around Europe, as we always are, in the coming weeks and up to the end of the year. Our next stop on what seems like a never-ending tour, just like Bob Dylan, is the TUPRA, the Organisation of Professionals in Regulatory Affairs annual symposium. That's in Rotterdam on the 30th of September, and it runs until October 20th. We'll be at booth 20, and of course, we'll have many of our NSF staff attending the Pharma Symposium, the Human Medicine Symposium, the Medical Device Symposium, and the Veterinary Symposium, and they'll be there in Rotterdam. We're also in Ireland, in Galway, at the QA-RA Global Access Conference, which is hosted by Irish MedTech. That's on 23rd and 24th of October. And then we have our own event, our annual Pharma Biotech Conference, which is one of my favorite events every year. It's on in the Royal Society of Chemistry on the 14th of November. It's a one-day event. And interestingly enough, two of the topics we talked about today are covered at the conference. We're talking about AI in the life science sector, particularly in pharma, and also supply chain issues. Some of the speakers confirmed so far from AstraZeneca, British Generics Association, British Biosimilars Association, and many others. And overall, we've got a full day of speakers who are regulators, industry experts, and from industry bodies. And you'll find more information about that event on nsf.org. In the meantime, on behalf of Maria and myself, thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions, email us, lifesciences@nsf.org, and we'll be happy to answer those. But as we said, there are some challenges in the Irish sector. It's buoyant, and those challenges are being addressed either through training, recruitment and skills, or the outsourcing to companies such as NSF. Again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.